So over 3 years, I interviewed 120 Muslims from Arab countries, from Turkey, Iran, and I asked them what is the factor that led them to Christ? How did they become Christians? And 60%, it's more than half, said through a dream or vision.
Wow.
And in my book, I mentioned several of these dreams and visions. Some of them are exceptional.
Hey everybody, in this episode I interviewed George Husney. He's my first author on the podcast. It was really awesome. We met at a breakfast and I was like, hey, I would love to interview you on my podcast. And I might have had about 10 or 15 minutes between then and when we sat down about 2 hours later to do the interview. So I had no time to do any research or find out anything. We had just met and I was like, I've got to interview you. He wrote a book called Engaging Islam, which I started reading. It's been really good. I'm learning a lot. And I really, I have more questions now that I wish maybe we have to do a follow-up interview. But he's got a really awesome story. He was born in Lebanon, and just his interactions with Muslims growing up was just really interesting. He is the founder of Horizons International. He lives in Boulder, Colorado. Like I said, he's the author of Engaging Islam. And Horizons International has a really awesome ministry. You can look them up online. You can find them online at horizonsinternational.org if you'd like to have some more information there. And then you can also find George's book on there as well. So, like I said, this was a really last-minute interview, but I was really happy that we were able to get into some stuff. And now that I recorded this interview last year, and it's just now being released, but I wish that we could have an interview again because I'd love to hear his insights on what's going on in Israel right now. So we'll see if maybe we can get another podcast set up soon. But I hope you like this. So enjoy.
All right, so I'm here with George Husney. If I said that wrong, I apologize. But author of Engaging Islam. So today we're going to be talking about... Who knows? We'll see.
You want to talk about Islam?
Yeah.
Because it's a very controversial topic. The whole world is split on Islam. Some are saying, it's a peaceful religion, it's wonderful. And some, even Christians, say they're brothers in the faith. And on the other hand, people say, well, look at all the violence, the terrorism that come out of Islam, look at their bloody history. And so there's mixed feelings. Some love, some hate, and some are in between, not sure. So we want to clarify this today.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is George Husney, as you said.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in my own country of Lebanon. And I grew up in a very strong Muslim city from a minority of Greek Orthodox Christians. In my teens, I was exposed to the gospel through evangelical pastor, and I gave my life to Jesus, and my whole life changed. One of the things that changed, pertaining to our topic, is how I feel about Muslims. Before I became a Christian, I hated Muslims because of their history of killing Christians, the conquests of, the whole Middle East used to be Christian.
Yeah. And did you see any of that kind of firsthand?
Yes. When I was 9, we had a war,
Mm-hmm.
and our Christian neighborhood was attacked and was destroyed.
Oh, wow.
So my mother took us, my siblings and I, out of the house just a day before our house was demolished.
Wow.
By bombs, explosions. So I actually didn't like Muslims. I hated them, and I began to train with the militia, even at the age of 9, to fight. Well, they told us if you don't get prepared, they can come and kill you. So
Yeah.
eat them for lunch before they have you for dinner. That's what they said. But after I received Christ, I said, I have no reason to hate Muslims, for only one reason, is that they are created in the image of God, as human beings, not as Muslims.
Mm.
So I began to see Muslims as people who are prodigal,
Yeah.
who have actually been deceived by Satan and wanted to go away. If you remember, Muslims claim to be descendants of Ishmael. And Ishmael was kicked out of Abraham's home because Isaac was the son of the promise.
Right.
And Sarah didn't like, there was jealousy between the boys and between her and Hagar. So she asked Abraham to kick Hagar out with her son. So they left. Muslims claim that they went all the way to Arabia, where they built the Kaaba. And Abraham came to visit and helped Ishmael build the Kaaba, which is not necessarily historically accurate.
Okay.
But spiritually, they connect themselves with Ishmael. And if we accept that claim, whether it's historic or not, it's still what they believe. So I consider them prodigals because they left Abraham's home.
Yeah.
But the Bible is clear that Jesus came to restore the family of Abraham, to bring them together. And God said to Abraham, you will be a blessing to all peoples of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So are Muslims part of the people of the earth?
Yeah.
Definitely. They are probably between 1.5 and 1.8 billion people on earth, forming about a fifth of the population. And I believe God loves them.
Yeah.
God doesn't love their sin, but He loves them as sinners. So if they are prodigal, we need to wait for them to come back. Like the prodigal father waited for his son to return, and he forgave him and loved him and incorporated him back into the family. So God wants to heal the family of Abraham and bringing the Muslims back to the fold.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that's possible is through Jesus Christ. So whether you like Muslims or you don't like them, it's the same.
Yeah.
They need Christ.
Yep.
And so what do you think of that?
No, I think, yeah, I haven't had time to read through the book yet, so I had seen the mention of the descendant from Ishmael, but I had never heard that. And, I'd say I'm pretty ignorant on a lot of what makes...
That's not your specialty. That's my specialty.
Yeah. But then, so fast forward, or go back to, you were training in the militia, and then you came to salvation and saw that, or conversion, whatever, and your heart changed. So then, what changed then in your life there? Were you still training in the militia, or?
Well, when I trained in militia, it was, like a little child carrying a gun and trying to use it when necessary. We were told that if they come attack us, we want to kill them before they kill us, before they get to us. But thankfully, the war stopped 8 months later, and we became refugees at that time. And we returned and rebuilt and so on. We were renting, so it wasn't our own home.
Okay.
But we rented again and, survived. But that was when I was 9 into 10 years old. But I was 12 when I received Christ. And I stopped hating Muslims, but I did not love them yet until I was 14. When a missionary came actually and was telling me about the need to evangelize or to tell the good news of Jesus to Muslims. I said, no, Muslims, they deserve hell. I mean, But he said to me, didn't Jesus die for Muslims? That really blew me away. I said, oh, you're right.
Yeah.
And I hadn't thought of that. So I was 14 at the time, and from that moment on, my heart changed, truly. It's not enough not to hate, but now we have to love.
Mm.
And I learned from one of the pastors who was my mentor, is that love has feet. You can't love emotionally, you have to love practically. You can say, I love you, but if you don't show it in your life, a husband can say, I love my wife, but I don't want to see her. I don't want to spend time with her. Let her go to her parents. I love her enough to let her go back home.
Mm.
That's not love.
Yeah.
So that challenged me to reach out to the Muslims as prodigals, as people who have left the house of Abraham in history, and they're still far, they're still away, and they still claim to be children of Ishmael. And if they do claim to be children of Ishmael, they're lost. And they need to be restored back to Abraham, who is the blessing of all nations.
So then do they see that connection to Ishmael as some sort of broken connection to Abraham, or do they just say that we are the true descendants because Ishmael then was the firstborn?
They don't think of it as having been kicked out. The only thing they think of is they're children of Abraham through Ishmael.
Okay.
So Abraham is really the father of the Jews, the Christians,
Mm-hmm.
and the Muslims attach themselves to that. It's not a really a legitimate claim historically or even ethnically,
Mm-hmm.
because Arabia is far from Canaan, and Ishmael grew up in Canaan, and then when he was kicked out, the Bible tells us in Genesis 25 that he married an Egyptian, and they lived in the upper area of the Sinai Desert, which is called Beersheba, the well of seven. That's the meaning of it in Hebrew. And it also tells us he had 12 children, 12 tribes, and they all settled there and died there.
Okay.
So there is no historical evidence that Abraham and Ishmael made it to Mecca, which is way deep, about 1,000 miles away.
Okay.
And there are no, airplanes to take them. So that's a long journey.
Yeah.
But regardless, whether they're Buddhists or Hindus or Muslims or even nominal Christians, everybody needs Jesus. So they're all prodigals. I was a prodigal when I did not know Jesus, and he
Yeah.
brought me home. So we want to bring them home.
Yeah. So when would you say then your ministry really started reaching out to Muslims? Like you
At that
personally?
time, there was a team of missionaries who invited me to go with them to translate for them. They were foreigners.
Okay.
So one of them spoke French, and that was my language at the time, before I learned English. And so I was translating for them. But as I was translating, I was hearing how people reach, how to evangelize. And I began to love to do it. So since then, I started doing that. Of course, I was in school, and I went to university and graduated. And after my graduation, I had a larger vision than my own town and country. Since I was 18,
Mhm.
began to travel to other countries. I was in Yemen, for example, in 1971. There were no church. I planted the first church there,
Oh wow.
which is still going now. There were 35 people when we started. Now there are thousands.
That's amazing.
But that's 50 years. But then I discovered some people don't have the Bible in their language.
Mm-hmm.
In Iraq, for example, in Turkey and Syria, there's the Kurdish people.
Yeah.
And the area is called Kurdistan. So I went there and translated the Bible through hiring people to translate it. I did not know the language. I learned, some terminology and so on, but supervised the translation. And now we have tens of thousands of Christians who came out of Islam because of the Kurdish Bible became available, so they could read about Jesus.
Yeah.
They didn't even have a verse translated to their language.
Wow.
Then I discovered the Kabyle people, the Berbers of North Africa, did the translation in the Kabyle language. Now there are anywhere between 100,000 to 350,000. We're not sure. There's this fluctuation of those who left Islam and become Christians. A lot of churches, they're persecuted heavily. In the last 3 years, the government closed down 43 churches.
Oh wow.
But there are hundreds of small churches and some larger ones. They closed the large ones.
So when they
So I've been
closed-
working with Muslims ever since I graduated and started working on Bible translation. And now started a ministry called Horizons International. And we have staff in Africa, Asia, Middle East, East Europe, focusing on Muslim areas. Because so many Muslims are disappointed in Islam. And,
What are they disappointed about?
well, before September 11, most Muslims did not know that the Quran, the holy book of Islam, actually encourages, orders Muslims to kill their enemies, Christians and Jews and pagans. And there's a lot of that. Like I have a list of 164 references to killing others. And there's a lot of oppression of women also in the Quran.
Yeah.
Women are second class, third class, more like slaves. They are the ownership of men, and men can marry as many women as they want to. Legally 4, but illegally as many as you want to. I mean, some people will debate this because there's a misinterpretation sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But then September 11 exposed Islam, the dark side of Islam. You may ask me, why would Muslims not know this in their own book? Do you want to ask them a question?
Yeah, I think that would be a great question. Why do Muslims not realize all of these violent things?
Because
that are in the Quran?
Muslims require the Quran to be read in the Arabic language. And 80% of Muslims don't know Arabic.
Okay.
For example, the largest, most populated Islamic country is Indonesia, with
Mhm.
220 million Muslims. They know Indonesian, they don't know Arabic.
Right.
India, 160 million. They don't know Arabic. They know Hindi and some other languages. Pakistan, add to all these Asian countries with over 100 million population. And then you go to Iran and Turkey. You add all these up, there are many times more than the Arabs, who
Yeah.
are about 350 million. So, and also the Arabs cannot all read the Quran, because the Quran is written in ancient 7th century language.
Okay.
I mean, if you compare it in the English language of the Middle Ages, prior to Shakespeare, if you read Gulliver's Travels and Beowulf and so many pieces of literature and poetry from that time, you can't even read it.
Right.
Yeah, you can't understand it.
So then,
So why would Muslims force people to read the Quran in Arabic?
yeah.
And translation is only recently has been allowed in the last few decades, but they're not considered merit before God. You read them as literature. But to receive reward from God for reading the Quran, you need to read it in the original. So they teach you Arabic, but only how to read it by rote. Like you look at it as images and you learn how to read it, but you don't know what it means. So that's why most Muslims don't know the content of the Quran. They only know what they're taught. And they're taught Islam is a peaceful religion. Muhammad is the best character of all people on earth, and so on.
And that's fascinating. And so, I'm thinking traditional Western church. We go to church and there's the teaching and they're reading from it, but in their church they would be reading from it in Arabic and then preaching in the local language.
It's called a mosque.
Right. Oh yeah, the mosque. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
And so
They don't actually read it in the mosque. They just do prayers.
okay.
And these are prayers that are pre-memorized. They're taught. And it's the same prayer in all the world.
And that's the one that they do multiple times a day.
Yeah, they repeat 5 times a day with different postures, different times. It's very strict religion with rituals and customs that are to be followed literally.
Yeah. So then when you're exposing what's actually in the Quran, do people push back and say like that's not what it really says, or
Well, there's always apologetics, arguments back and forth, and everybody, we have a saying in Arabic that if the mother of the monkey is a deer.
What is that?
Playing on the word deer to her, even though he's a monkey, but he's also a deer, D-E-E-R. It's like she sees him as a beautiful animal. I think they're beautiful, but that's a saying to say that nobody will say my religion is bad. So they defend their religion. They even defend the terrorism, there's a lot of it, by saying, well, this is only in defense if you're attacked and so on. But that's not true. It's true that if you are attacked, you defend yourself. But Islamic conquests were not defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Muhammad fought 28 battles himself with his sword.
Okay.
Muhammad killed with his own sword thousands of Christians and Jews. In one time, 800 Jews.
Wow.
They're slaughtered with a sword. And then before he died in 632, so in 8 years of his mission, they fought 80 wars,
Wow.
80 battles, because they were aggressively promoting Islam in all of the region, reaching Middle East, North Africa, all of Arabia. In the 100 years following, they reached China and India, Indonesia, all those areas. And that's some of it by the sword, some of it by not the sword, but by pressure.
Okay.
For example, if I come to you and my sword is on my side, I don't really lift it. You look at my sword, say, okay, I surrender.
Yeah.
And that's the word which means Islam. Islam means surrender. It's a political term, but over the years they started spiritualizing it, surrender to God. It's not really surrender to God. It's surrender to the conquests of Muhammad and his followers. After his death, there were so many wars and became an empire based in Mecca at first, and then moved to Syria, moved to Iraq, moved to Egypt. And the final dynasty, the empire was in Turkey, the Ottoman Empire,
Mm-hmm.
that spread Islam by the sword. They've killed Armenians and Christians. And East Europe, they had a big war with Albania. And so, the Quran encourages that thing. I mean, they say, well, Christians also have had the Crusaders.
Right.
Well, I agree. But the Crusaders had a reason, which was more defensive. But I don't want to excuse the Crusaders, except to say that the Bible does not teach us to go kill our enemy, but to love our enemy. But the Quran does say kill your enemy.
Yeah.
That's the difference. So if I sin against my Bible, don't blame the Bible for it. But if I sin because of the Bible, then you can blame the Bible.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Islam.
Okay. So then let's jump into the ministry that you formed. What is y'all's main goal?
Well, Horizons International is a fulfillment of what Jesus said, go to all nations and preach the gospel, which is called the Great Commission,
Mm-hmm.
which literally means great command. It's a command. He commanded them to go and reach people from all nations and tribes and languages. So we believe that all people on earth are prodigals. They need Jesus Christ to be saved and come back to the fold of God. And Jesus said, I have other sheep that I must bring them here, so there'll be one.
Mm-hmm.
And that oneness is the church. So I believe there is no salvation, eternal life, no forgiveness of sins without Jesus Christ. Because we have to follow what God planned for our salvation. But history is rife with people who decided to go against God and do their own religion. Can you guess who's the first human being on earth who created his own religion?
First human being. I mean, I
In
guess.
history.
I mean, I might say maybe Adam. He's separated in a way, but he was still. So
Yeah.
I don't know. You know,
Adam you can say, but more
Price is Right
specifically
answer.
his
That's
son.
$1.
His son Cain.
Okay.
Because Adam committed the sin, rebelled against God, but God forgave him by sacrificing animals and dressed them with the animal skin. That's, shed blood to redeem them. Although God said, when you eat of this, you will die.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a sentence to death. But many people say, well, they didn't die. The reason they didn't die is that God redeemed them, atoned for them by the killing of animals. And then, even though it's not written, but it's implied, that he taught them that the way to receive forgiveness for any future sins is to sacrifice an animal. That's why Cain sacrificed a sheep. Not Cain, Abel, his brother. But Cain said, why should I do like my brother? I'll do it my own way. But he worshipped God. He didn't worship some idol. He didn't worship some crazy God.
Mm-hmm.
He worshipped the same God that his brother worshipped. But his worship was not accepted. Why? Because he did it his own way, not God's way. And then we see that also in Genesis 11. The people of Babylon wanted to build a tower that reaches heaven. Most people think, what does that mean? How many millions of miles is this
Right.
tower? It's not that. It's Babel. Babel means the door to God. El is God, Elohim. Bab means door. So basically they built a temple with, of course, a steeple so people can know where it is. But the idea is they opened the door to heaven by doing this temple,
Mm-hmm.
which was not required by God. And so they defiled God. They rebelled against God. So that's formed their own religion. And throughout the centuries, we see a lot of religions that just did not follow God's command. And one of them is Islam. Muhammad was exposed to the Bible, and he actually quotes the Bible, but he created his own book, which agrees with the Bible, but this also contradicts the Bible. And that's where the deception is,
Okay.
where you have some truth, and you build on that truth falsehood, then it becomes false.
Yeah. Okay. And so then your ministry is just trying to get the word to.
Tell the truth.
Yeah.
Jesus is the truth. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to God the Father except through me. So, and we have seen gladly a lot of Muslims leave Islam and are now worshiping Jesus in churches all over the world.
That's awesome. And so when I was with YWAM, one of the things they were talking about was the man in white appearing to
Dreams.
Muslims. Yeah, just dreams, and how vivid that is for people, and how it's actually appearances of Jesus kind of, and it's just, I don't know, it's this miraculous kind of intervention. There is that, like, you can almost see God's heart for these people in the way that he's pursuing people who are in the midst of Islam, and it's wild to hear some of those stories.
If you would tell your viewers about my book, they may want to order it.
Oh,
because
yeah, definitely.
A lot of stories about dreams in the book. EngagingIslam.org. You can order that through through Amazon. Engaging Islam by George Husney. The Bible is filled with stories of dreams and visions.
Right.
Not only dreams, but visions. The difference between a dream and a vision is, dream is when you're asleep and you see things you're not aware of until you wake up and then remember what you saw.
Yeah.
If you wait 5 minutes, you may forget. So you have to, what did I just see? The vision is when somebody is in broad daylight, sitting or standing or walking, and some big white, dressed in white person shows up and talks, and then disappears in your own eyes, before your eyes. So I did a survey. I do conferences every year for converts from Islam to encourage them, teach them, and so on. So over 3 years, I interviewed 120 Muslims from Arab countries, from Turkey, Iran, and one from Senegal, a Muslim convert. And I asked them what is the factor that led them to Christ? How did they become Christians? And 60%, it's more than half, said through a dream or vision.
Wow.
And in my book, I mentioned several of these dreams and visions. Some of them are exceptional, like one woman from Saudi Arabia saw this man dressed in white, but she couldn't see his face because it was bright like the sun. But she saw him writing on a white wall these words, I am the way, the truth, and the life, in Arabic. أنا الطريق والحق والحياة. She woke up wondering, what is this about? So she Googled those words, found out that these words are Jesus' words. So she said, the one who appeared to me and wrote that is Jesus.
Yeah.
And she began to investigate. She became a Christian.
Wow.
And many other stories like that.
So, yeah, speaking of the book, what made you write this book?
I wrote this right after September 11.
Okay.
Because people ask me, what do you think? What's going on? Why is this happening? So I wanted the church in America to understand Islam. This is not a textbook. It's quick read, but it has the basics.
Yeah.
So you understand the difference between Christianity and Islam, some of the misperceptions about Islam, good or bad, and also how to reach them personally through hospitality, through how to share the gospel with them, how to answer their questions, how to ask them questions to get to know them.
Yeah, I remember after September 11th, there was a lot of hatred directed towards
Us Muslims.
anybody with in any sort of Middle Eastern look. People were just like, oh, they're...
It's understandable, but I would say to every Christian, you cannot hate people.
Right.
You can hate sin. God hates sin, but he loves the sinner.
Yeah.
Loves us so much that he died to save us. And I think we need to sacrifice our lives for saving those who are lost.
Yeah. No, one of the things that you mentioned earlier today when we had breakfast was just the lack of evangelism in American Christians, and just how there's this hesitancy to share the gospel and to walk out that Great Commission.
Well, you know, America is known for land of freedom, right? And freedom is political, but also individual. So you raise children as free children. I was raised in a democratic society, but not that free to choose everything.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother cooked a meal. She didn't ask us, would you like this? We just ate it. Today I see my own children ask their children, would you like this? You don't have to eat it. It's okay if you don't like it. And then they end up eating ice cream and some things they like, and the other things, the vegetables, leave them out.
Yeah.
So that individual freedom is good, but also bad. And so we, as Christians, like to allow people freedom to think as they think. And their thinking is legitimate as mine, especially in postmodern society, where there is no absolute truth. And that concept, unbeknownst to us, is really part of our culture. So there are a lot of Christians now who do not want to evangelize others because they're free to choose.
Yeah.
I chose, let them choose. They can choose this or that. And my father told me choose. You can do this or that. You can wear blue or green or red, whatever you want. Whereas when just whatever was available, I wore it. Right?
Yeah.
So that's a cultural issue. Another thing Americans do not like is confrontation. So they're not very, if they hate you, they'll confront you. But about choice, telling you about their faith, they don't want to confront you with that. Just leave you alone.
Yeah.
But the mandate from God, through Jesus Christ's word saying, go, preach the gospel, is not a choice. We don't have a choice. They can choose to refuse, but we cannot choose not to speak. We're required as, not like if you don't do it, we're going to go to hell. But if you are saved, don't you want to save others?
Right.
Can love be so selfish that you would only keep it to yourself? And even way back in the Old Testament, when God said to Abraham, I will bless you, he also said, I'll make you a blessing. In 2 Corinthians 5:17, it says, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. And tells us that God, through Christ, reconciled us to himself. And then what's next? He gave us the ministry of reconciliation to implore people be reconciled to God. So two sides of the same coin. One side, God says, come to me through Jesus Christ. The other side, go to them, bring them to Christ. So come to me, go to them are the two sides of the Great Commission.
Yeah. I think one thing that you mentioned there, the lack of absolute truth, just how dangerous that idea is. And it's definitely just permeated our culture. I mean, with all the gender stuff, just everything. And then that we don't want to offend people because we're going to let everybody kind of
choose their own path.
Yeah, that's what they think.
But this is a segue toward humanism and atheism.
Mm-hmm.
We're not aware that we are actually encouraging our kids to choose atheism when we do not tell them there's an absolute truth.
In what way? Like, just since there's everything's whatever, you can just walk away from God? Or
if I don't feel desperate to save your life, I won't share anything with you that would save your life.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll begin to think that you're okay. Especially if you are a good guy.
Right.
You're not
morally
killing anybody. You live normally. Maybe you lie once in a while, but you're not really that bad. And that can deceive us to thinking there's no difference between you and you and me. I believe in Jesus, you don't believe in Jesus, but we're still the same. And that is, in a way, denying you. That's why I say segue towards atheism, denying you faith. You need to know about faith, what difference it makes. And sadly, the Christian and the non-Christian sitting next to each other in a movie theater or in a bar, or even in church, if there's no difference between them in their lifestyle, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Why should a Christian look exactly like a non-Christian, or a non-Christian look exactly like a Christian? They're morally and ethically and in regard to knowledge and truth, if there's no difference, that's pretty bad.
Right. I mean, Christians got their name out of how different they originally lived.
That's
your
right.
little Christ.
Separate.
And they were so different that people noticed, and it was like, oh, well, they're Christians. And so, yeah, we've definitely lost that, I don't even want to say boldness, but uniqueness. Everybody's
Right.
the downside of America. But then, so we'll jump back to your ministry. I know you said you guys are involved in a university close to here, right? Or
We have work with international students,
Mm-hmm.
with immigrants, with asylum seekers, The main word that we use is displaced people
Okay.
all over the world. If you are an American in Saudi Arabia, you are a displaced person, means you're not home. If you're a Saudi in America, you're a displaced person. If you are an Indian in China, you're displaced. If you're Chinese in India, you're displaced. So we focus on the displaced people because those are ones we believe by design of God being displaced through wars, economic and educational reasons, and so many other reasons, immigration, business. And so the Bible actually uses the two terms, scatter and gather. Scattering has a purpose. And God said, I will scatter you so that in distant lands you may seek me and find me. So when people are outside their comfort zone, not in their own cultural milieu, or French word for context, then they're much more open to new ideas and so on. So we feel we see more success this way. Today I was talking to somebody who wants to go to Algeria. I said, it's very difficult for you to operate as a Christian missionary in Algeria. But why not reach Algerians in France?
Yeah.
There's 1 million of them in Marseille. So you can reach them. Are you called to a country or to a people? If you're called to a people, find them wherever they are. And there they are reachable. You can sit with them and nobody will kick you out of the country.
Yeah. And so, in terms of I'm just thinking back when I was in Europe, probably 6 years ago. I was working with a refugee camp outside Vienna. And it proved to be a lot more difficult since we didn't have access to the camp. We had to wait till they came out. But we had a lot of ministry, and we had a lot of fruit that came of it. It was harder to get in. So then, are you working with refugees here in Colorado?
All over the country and all over the world.
Well, specifically, I'm just kind of wondering, like, the ones that come here, like, what kind of programs are you guys involved in? Like, are you...
Friendship partners, finding host families, helping them with housing. I brought 75 people from Iraq, sponsored them in Colorado, and got them houses from a needle to a car.
Wow.
All donated by the churches to get them started, then teach them English, find them jobs, and then releasing them. So all of them now are successful doing their own work.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's just one example. But we're also helping refugees in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine caused 9 million refugees from Ukraine into neighboring countries.
Yeah.
So we work with them through the churches. The earthquake in Turkey and Syria gave us new opportunities that we didn't have before to work through the churches also. We always like to work through the church rather than as a nonprofit organization, NGO, on our own, because it's much more efficient, distribution of food and clothing and so on.
Yeah.
First thing we did in Turkey, the morning of the earthquake, we provided blankets and warm clothing. And then we began to provide food and then medicine. And now we're even building toilets because they're sleeping they don't have homes.
Yeah. Now, and I think going through the local church is so powerful because then you're also connecting the people in the community to the church. And I think that's such a problem with more of a disaster relief stuff specifically, is because people are there. They're like, hey, we're here because of Jesus. And somebody's like, oh, that's amazing.
And then they leave.
And then there's no connection. Yeah. And they're like, all right, well, now you're gone. And what am I supposed to do?
Well, in Lebanon, we provide food for 128 churches to distribute to the refugees. We don't have to do it like a long line of people coming to take food from our center.
Mm-hmm.
But through the church has a ministry to them too. They can counsel them, they can help them. I can only know so many people.
Right.
But when we have 128 churches and each church has dozens of people involved, or hundreds in some cases. The work is shared. Everybody, nobody is overburdened with the work.
Yeah. I think that's so awesome. All right, so let's jump one thing that you said this morning that it kind of caught me off guard, but it sounded like, I don't know how I feel about that, but then I was like, oh man, that's really biblical, is you mentioned we're going to go where the fruit is. And, talking about one center moving to a different place. And at first that idea was like, man, I'm like, I don't know if that's, but then I thought back to Jesus talking about how like you're going to go to places, they're not going to receive you, shake the dust off your feet and keep moving. And I think sometimes moments like that, like, can be there to kind of check us. We're like, wow, I mean, like, we should be seeing fruit. If we're not, we're doing something wrong. And I don't know if you wanted to speak into that just a little bit, and just, or if it was just a thought in my head. I was like, man, I want to touch on that because I thought it was.
I receive advertising for new windows all the time by a company. They keep sending me, oh, we'll get you new windows for 20% off and so on. Well, my windows are fine. I'm not going to respond. But some other home who've had broken windows or 25-year-old, they're cracking and so on, they will appreciate that. They'll give them a call, and that's why they keep harassing people to get. So they make money from that kind of advertising. Similarly, we cannot push Jesus on people who don't want Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Those who respond usually either had a dream or vision of Jesus, but they did not know what to do with it. That in the Bible, a lot of dreams. Daniel and Joseph explained dreams, but people did not know how to interpret them. So God uses us in the lives of those who've had dreams to interpret it for them. One guy didn't even know it was Jesus, but he saw a guy dressed in white across from the lake, and he told him, come walk on the lake. Come walk to me. So I can't. I'll swim. I can't swim. He said, walk on the water. And he started walking on the water. So I opened the Bible, showed him that story. He said, whoa, my dream is in the Bible.
That's awesome.
So those who respond either have had a dream or they've watched YouTube
mm-hmm.
or a TV channel, and they began to think. And you come to help them move a step further.
Yeah.
So, but those who are opposed to you, they're wasting your time.
Yeah.
If somebody comes on my door and say, I don't want new windows. I just put new windows last year. No, you really need them. I'll give you 30% off. Give me 90% off, and I don't want windows. Get lost. Get out of here. So if somebody does not want to hear about Jesus, I move to the next one. That's what Jesus taught us.
Yeah.
He said, shake the dust, and the dust will become like a witness against them, that they had the opportunity, but they didn't accept.
And I think, too, I mean, it's kind of a contentious topic sometimes, but just how Jesus says, like, only those who the Father draws to me are going to come to me, and there is that.
No one can come to me unless the Father draws them.
Yeah, and there's that free will choice, but I think a lot of times we have this idea that we have to be doing all the work. It's if I do this, then I'm going to do this for Jesus, and we forget that God is at work too. Yeah, most if not all of it's going to come from what God is doing, and then you're going to be the pawn Conduit. That He moves. Yeah, and I think that sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves, and
the burden is on Christ. He said, "Come to me, and I will give you rest."
Yeah.
But we are the ones who will bring these people to Jesus.
That's right.
To give them rest.
Yeah, because beautiful are the feet of those who bring the good news. We gotta do something. Well, I really appreciate you taking some time and coming over here and talking with me. Tell the people again, the book is Engaging Islam. Oh, that's here. I don't know if I can see it there.
By George Husni. Yeah. Amazon or from our website, engagingislam.org.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.